Poems to a Listener, readings and conversation with contemporary poets.
Engraved. A man and woman sit by the river bank. He fishes, she reads. The fish are not biting. She has not turned the page for an hour. The light around them holds itself taut. No shadow moves, but the sky and the woods are dark. Night has advanced upon them.
Welcome to Poems to a Listener. I'm Henry Lyman, and in this half-hour program, we'll be visiting poet Denise Levertov and listening to poems from Candles in Babylon and other collections of her poetry published by New Directions. Many of her poems are concerned with the threat of nuclear war and with its effect on the individual mind. The poem we just heard observes two persons who sit in a prolonged moment of tense and rather frightening inertia.
I think it's a moment of unawareness on the part of the man and woman and of tension in nature around them.
In the space around them.
Yes.
Sort of
Yes.
a critical point.
Yes, exactly. And yet nothing is happening, no action is taking place, except that unobserved night has advanced upon them. And the man and woman are in a state of suspension there. There's a strange fixity about their position.
Do you see that as the position that a lot of us are in?
Yes, that state of psychic numbing is not a state in which people grow and change. It pins them.
I know of many instances of children who've asked their parents, will I grow to be an adult?
Yes. I've heard of children who simply assume that they will not. I've heard of a child who asked what he wanted to be when he grew up, said, well, I'm not going to grow up. Age of terror. Between the fear of the horror of afterwards and the despair in the thought of no afterwards, we move abraded, each gesture scraping us on the millstones. In dream, there was an afterwards. The unknown device, a silver computer as big as a block of offices at least, floating like Magritte's castle on its rock aloft in blue sky, did explode. There was a long moment of cataclysm, light of a subdued rose red suffused all the air before a rumbling, confused darkness ensued. But I came to, face down, and found my young sister alive near me, and knew my still younger brother and our mother and father were close by, too. And passionately relieved, I comforted my shocked sister, still not daring to raise my head, only stroking and kissing her arm, afraid to find devastation around us, though we, all five of us, seemed to have survived. And I readied myself to take roll call. Paul Levertov, Beatrice Levertov. And then in dream, not knowing if this device, this explosion, were radioactive or not, but sure that where it had centered, there must be wreck, terror, fire and dust. The millstones commenced their grinding again. And as in daylight, again we were held between them, cramped, scraped raw by questions. Perhaps, indeed, we were safe. Perhaps no worse was to follow. But what of our gladness when there, where the core of the strange rose light had flared up out of the detonation of brilliant angular silver, there must be others, others in agony, and as in waking daylight, the broken dead.
This is a vision that haunts you.
Yes.
And others? Do you think it haunts others?
Oh, definitely.
What effect do you think it has on people's lives?
I think it has a stunting effect unless they confront despair and go beyond it into action.
My own feeling is that the worldwide dread that has been imposed by our so-called leaders of nuclear catastrophe is itself a crime. I mean, obviously the power is the crime. The tremendous waste of money and energy is a crime. But the fear itself, imposing that kind of fear on people, is itself a crime, it seems to me.
It's a kind of blackmail, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But there are moments, aren't there?
Oh, yes. There are many. Moments of joy, moments of grace. The May mornings. May mornings wear light cashmere shawls of quietness, brush back waterfalls of burnished silk from clear and round brows. When we see them approaching over lawns, trailing dew-dark shadows and footprints, we remember, yes, the May mornings. How could we have forgotten? What solace it would have been to think of them. What solace it would be in the bitter violence of fire then ice again we apprehend. But it seems the May mornings are a presence known only as they pass, light-stepped, seriously smiling, bearing each a leaf-lined basket of wakening flowers.
Given the circumstances under which we live now, the very circumstances we've been talking about, how do May mornings appear to you? How do they seem?
More beautiful than ever.
More beautiful than ever.
Yes, well, when something beautiful and beloved is threatened, it gives a poignancy to its beauty that tends to intensify that beauty.
Things seem so short-lived.
They become as fragile as flowers.
As the flowers.
Yes.
Or as the May mornings themselves.
And so one feels the deep need to try to act to protect them. Concurrence. Each day's terror, almost a form of boredom. Madmen at the wheel and stepping on the gas and the brakes no good. And each day one, sometimes two, morning glories, faultless, blue, blue, sometimes flecked with magenta, each lit from within with the first sunlight.
You call each day's terror almost a form of boredom.
I feel it that way. I don't go around in a condition of chronic fright.
Well, you see morning glories.
I do see morning glories, but I do have the mental consciousness of that terror. And I'm tired of it. I'm really tired of it. I wish it were over. I know it won't be over in my lifetime, but there is the possibility of it being alleviated, at least in my lifetime. And if it isn't, then indeed there is very little time left.
And they're stepping on the gas.
Yep, they're stepping on the gas. Bus. The turnpike. Without history, a function of history, grossly cut through the woods. Second growth woods without memory, crowded saplings, bushes entangled, sparse weed crop on burned over sandy embankments. Brutally realized intentions speed us from city to city, a driver's world. And what is a driver? Driven? Obsessed? These thick-armed men seem at rest, assured, their world, a world of will and function.
The drivers of this world, as they drive our world down this turnpike of so-called progress, are they themselves driven, do you think? I mean, the poem asks the question. Are they obsessed? What's driving them?
I think what must be driving the so-called leaders of our world must be the desire for power. It must be competitiveness, a certain kind of self-assertion.
A certain kind of self-assertion. How do you mean that?
I suppose I'm talking about a kind of machismo. The life of others. Their high-pitched baying, as if in prayer's unison, remote, undistracted, given over utterly to belief. The skein of geese voyages south, hierarchic arrow of its convergence toward the point of grace, swinging and rippling, ribbon tail of a kite, loftily over lakes where they have not elected to rest, over men who suppose earth is man's, over golden earth, preparing itself for night and winter. We humans are smaller than they and crawl unnoticed about and about the smoky map.
The Canada geese, as they fly over the planet, do not see us, we're so small, and they do not see the men who suppose that the earth is man's. The men who suppose that the earth is man's. Isn't that really the crux of the problem?
Yes, I think it is, because an anthropocentric view of life,
The belief that we are the center,
inevitably leads to the arrogant use of the earth instead of a humble and respectful cooperation with nature.
respect.
Respect. And what that enjoins upon the species is a high degree of responsibility towards other forms of life. The split mind. A governor is signing papers, arranging deals. His adored grandchild sits at his feet. He gives her the architect's model of the nuclear plant to play with. A little house, she says, with funny fat chimneys. Goddamn commies, he mutters, crushing the report on nuclear hazards into a ball and tossing it across the room, ignoring the wastebasket and plutonium and the idea that he could be wrong, one gesture sufficing for all. He strokes her shining hair. Her death is in his hands. In hers, the simulacrum of his will to power. A funerary playhouse. If he lives to see her change in the sick radiance later, after the plant is built, what will he tell himself? How deep does the split go, the fault line under the planned facility, into his mind?
There's a split in his mind, but there's also a split under the planned facility. So
That's right.
that refers to a specific nuclear plant, right?
Yes, this was written after one of the Seabrook demonstrations, and it is based on something which one of my friends, as we came away from Seabrook after the demonstration, Seabrook, New Hampshire, actually saw. He went into a diner, and there was the then governor of New Hampshire talking to the counterman, and he was talking with great, obviously sincere affection about his little grandchild. And yet this was the man who was promoting this plant, which was on the site of a tremor. It was being built on a fault.
Right. He lives with this schism in himself. So this model is then
The architect's model is a little thing that the child can play with like a toy.
A funerary playhouse. And the simulacrum of his will. How do you mean that?
The image of that which he wills. The material symbol of his will to power.
It's facsimile.
It's facsimile. And it is at one and the same time that, and it is a playhouse for the child. But because of its deadly nature, its potentially deadly nature, it is a funerary playhouse. What it could be. Uranium, with which we know only how to destroy, lies always under the most sacred lands. Australia, Africa, America, wherever it's found, is found an oppressed ancient people who knew, long before white men found and named it, that there under their feet, under rock, under mountain, deeper than deepest water springs, under the vast deserts familiar inch by inch to their children, lay a great power. And they knew the folly of wrestling, ravaging from the earth that which it kept so guarded. Now at this instant, men are gouging lumps of that power, that presence, out of the tortured planet the ancients say is our mother, breaking the doors of her sanctum, tearing the secret out of her flesh. But left to lie, its metaphysical weight might in a million years have proved benign, its true force being to be a clue to righteousness, showing forth the human power not to kill, to choose not to kill, to transcend the dull force of our weight and will. That known, profound presence, untouched, the sign providing witness, occasion, ritual for the continuing act of non-violence, of passionate reverence, active love.
The poem says that uranium is often found on sacred lands.
For instance, in the American West, the largest deposits of uranium are in lands sacred to Native Americans.
And they somehow sensed it.
I believe that they somehow sensed it. They didn't know it by our ratiocinative processes for finding such things, but there are other ways of knowing.
Men, as the poem points out, men are digging it out, tearing it out of the earth.
Yes.
But what if we were to leave it in the earth? What would it become, or what could it become?
If it were left there, it could become a perpetual warning and sign of good faith.
And our choice not to.
Our choice, exactly.
Not to destroy.
Yes.
And a choice towards another kind of will than the will we're familiar with, then.
Yes.
A will towards active love. How do you mean that? In your own experience or mine, how do you respond to your own word, active love? Or passionate reverence?
Well, reverence and love actually enter into communion with that which is loved. Freedom. Perhaps we humans have wanted God most as witness to acts of choice made in solitude, acts of mercy, of sacrifice, wanted that great single eye to see us, steadfast as we flowed by. Yet there are other acts, not even vanity or anxious hope to please knows of. Bone doings, leaps of nerve, heart cries of communion. If there is bliss, it has been already and will be, outreaching utterly, blind to itself, flooded with otherness.
Flooded with otherness. What kind of experience is that?
It's in the same sentence with the phrase blind to itself. It's self-forgetfulness, where a person can lose that kind of vanity or anxious hope to please.
Flooded by otherness does suggest to me a kind of freedom, a freedom from a weight of an overburdensome self or self-consciousness. Does that have anything to do with what you consider to be active love?
Yes, I think so.
Isn't this pointing towards a very different kind of attitude from, say, that of the governor in the poem The Split Mind? Just the very opposite kind of attitude, and perhaps the kind of attitude we should seek out.
Well, I certainly think so. I don't know that one can deliberately seek it out. But perhaps there are things that one can deliberately do which might lead towards it.
Certain kinds of action?
Yes. About political action in which each individual acts from the heart. When solitaries draw close, releasing each solitude into its blossoming. When we give to each other the roses of our communion, a culture of gardens, horticulture, not agribusiness, arbors among the lettuce, small terrains. When we taste in small victories sometimes, the small, ephemeral, yet joyful harvest of our striving. Great power flows from us, luminous, a promise, yes. Then great energy flows from solitude, and great power from communion.
At such moments, at a demonstration, for example, don't you feel sometimes, what if everyone
Absolutely.
could join?
This is one of the places, perhaps the most important, in which our hope lies. I mean, we have not yet come to the point where we are without hope. We still keep having or being given another chance. The clock, the nuclear clock, keeps ticking away, but
when one thinks,
one of the sources of hope, if people would but realize it, is that power that just ordinary people have.
it's a power that can do anything.
Absolutely. If they put their individuality and their uniqueness and its energies together with those of others. Credo. I believe the earth exists, and in each minim mote of its dust the holy glow of thy candle. Thou, unknown I know, thou spirit, giver, lover of making of the wrought letter, wrought flower, iron, deed, dream. Dust of the earth, help thou my unbelief. Drift, grey become gold in the beam of vision. I believe and interrupt my belief with doubt. I doubt and interrupt my doubt with belief. Be, beloved, threatened world, each minim mote, not the poisonous luminescence forced out of its privacy, the sacred lock of its cell broken. No, the ordinary glow of common dust in ancient sunlight. Be that I may believe. Amen.
We've been visiting poet Denise Levertov and listening to poems from Candles in Babylon and other collections of her poetry published by New Directions. I'm Henry Lyman. Thanks for joining us.
Poems to a Listener was produced by WFCR, Amherst, Massachusetts, with technical assistance by Sheldon Katzman. Financial assistance was provided by the Massachusetts Council on the Arts and Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Massachusetts Foundation for Humanities and Public Policy.